Hello, friends, fellow Substackers, and viewers of the Hugh Smiley podcast. I'm happy today to have a very special guest, all the way from across the pond, a small village in England, Melanie Reinhart. And I've known Melanie a few years, not too long, but I'm a fan, definitely, of what I call my Centauress Mentoress. and
Oh, that's funny.
yeah, a little Latin there, but it's very descriptive of uh, kind of a figure or icon that Melanie is to a lot of people, including myself. And Melanie has become a well-known and influential astrologer, and even beyond astrology, I'd even call you a kind of a psychologist, astropsychologist perhaps, and has a wonderful sense of the finger on the pulse of so many of the human dynamics and paradigms of very human, down to earth, as well as high as you want to go into the galaxy. So welcome, Melanie.
Thank you so much, Hugh. I've really been looking forward to our conversation, and it's a great honor to be here sharing your Substack space with you and your readers.
hmm So I'm hoping that you will be doing most of the talking. I have a couple of questions, maybe just to prime the pump, as they say, and but probably we'll get into a little bit of a dialogue rather than being a
Yes, please.
formal interview. And I'm just going to take the old-fashioned approach and read a little bit. Sometimes people read if they can't remember everything. There's so much about your professional life. So I'm just reading from your website, which can be seen later when we post the video to Substack. I'll write the URL underneath so you can all access this information and much, much more. So Melanie Reinhart is best known for her book Chiron and the Healing Journey and her work on Chiron and the Centaurs, Chariklo, Nessus, and Pholus. She is a prize-winning diploma holder of the Faculty of Astrological Studies in the UK, the Margaret Hone Award 1979, of whom she is also a patron of that faculty. Yeah. She was awarded the prestigious Charles Harvey Award in 2004, given by the Astrological Association of Great Britain for, quote, exceptional service to astrology. Her work is an unusual combination of intuition and meticulous research. So I think that's part of the beauty of bringing these two worlds together, just like the centaurs themselves, which bridge any kind of duality you can think of. Uh,
Yeah.
the left brain and the right brain, the research, which is very much left brain, and then the intuition, which I find is absolutely necessary for to be a good astrologer. Although some are almost entirely left brain, and it's pretty interesting stuff too. So there's a place
Mhm.
for a lot of diversity in this field, which also seems to be after years and years of kind of having a bad rap. When astronomy and astrology went their separate ways for a few centuries, people who are more scientifically oriented or learning to worship science cast astrology as it's superstition and rolled their eyes. But a lot of people now, just like younger people, are coming to for psychotherapy. It's beautiful healing process. But people are looking at astrology and how it can be useful for us. So, just before we start with questions and so on, I just love you to, from your heart, your center, share something that you feel in this moment. So you're good at being in the moment. Um, Whatever at all comes to your mind that you'd like to share with the multitudes out there. And
Well, um, what does come to my mind is actually what I think is rather a delicious little piece of pure trivia.
mm,
Um, as you know, I have the sun in Gemini, and actually, we love trivia as long as it's meaningful trivia.
Right.
So this is a short anecdote from something that happened this very week.
Mm.
Now, probably many of you who are reading or listening who are professional astrologers, many of you may have come across situations on forms you have to fill in, especially online, but not only. And when it gets to the bit about occupation, well, astrology is not listed. And so there's this massive list of wild approximations where we end up being called things like complementary therapists or educators or consultants or something. You know, astrology is just nowhere.
Yeah.
So this very week I had to renew my car insurance. And I remember when I did it last year, it was still the same. So in that policy, I'm a complementary therapist. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's okay. But it's also not quite true, you know.
Right.
So I thought I would ask about it
Mm-hmm.
again. So she said, "Oh, give me a minute." And so she flicked through the things that she said, "Oh, it says here astrologer." I said, "What?" And I said, that's never been possible before. And she said, "Yeah, the list has just been updated."
Is that right? Wow.
Yes. And profession can be astrology.
Excellent. Great.
And I thought that was so cool. I immediately let the Association of Professional
Mm.
Astrologers International, I let
Right.
them know immediately.
Everybody can get on board. Yeah.
But the point was that when we were working with my policy, in fact, I'd wanted to add something on which increased the cost of the policy. But when the occupation and business and all that was changed, it dropped the cost of my policy almost £75.
Well,
And
that's,
I
that's not
thought
too
that was
bad.
wonderful from a money point of view, you know.
So you're a cheap
But
date.
also I thought, oh, if I look at this symbolically, this is so interesting.
Yeah.
Because I thought, I'm sure, you know, my insurance company, it's probably an industry-wide update which has happened.
Right.
And for all I know, it could be global. I don't know about that. So I thought I would mention it. So if you are listed as something totally alien than what you do, which is be an astrologer,
Right. Right.
check out with your insurance company or whatever, because it might reduce your insurance bill.
Save you a few pounds. Very good. Well, the world is
Exactly.
evolving. Society is evolving. Even though we seem to
Exactly
be,
right.
the best of times, the worst of times kind of thing, but
Exactly.
miraculously, and bringing science back into the picture, thanks to technology and science, AI now is a wonderful thing. So there may not be a lot of astrologers in the audience for this particular video, so we'll try not to use language that's too astrologies or technical, but
Yeah.
I think it's easy to have a very wonderful and creative, deep conversation, mentioning maybe the names of the planets here and there or one of the signs, but without too much nitty-gritty. And so I have a couple of questions that I came up with that I thought might appeal to your collected, accumulated knowledge and your style and your approach to teaching, because you do teach as well as writing many books. I saw 7 at least, but I think there's more than that even. And you taught in person, as we say, or on site for years in England and around the world, different conferences, but also now more on Zoom and online, which is a wonderful vehicle, really. Especially as we get a bit older. I know I don't get quite so excited about taking long trips anymore as I used to, even 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And here we are. We're in the
Likewise.
same room, And Tesla, of course, said that, if you want to understand the universe, study vibration, frequency, sound. So here we have not only the sound of our voices, but our body language And usually we can see from the chest up, so we can see the breathing pattern of the other person and track information. And the movement itself is a vibration. And I believe that also the so-called etheric body extends, like when we're sleeping, off we go. The dense physical body's in the bed, but we're off having an adventure somewhere. So that our etheric bodies do meet in cyberspace. So there is a kind of a physical, somatic presence as well.
Yes, I agree with you completely on all that.
Oh, good, great. So speaking of somatic, and let's jump right into Chiron. I have a fascination with the whole story, the mythology, the astronomy, the astrology, the psychology, and Chiron was discovered recently, not even one orbit ago, 1977. So share with the readers, who is Chiron? People are starting to hear about Centaur Chiron, but most people don't know much, except for some astrologers, of course. But
yes, so in the Greek mythology, Chiron was known as the wise centaur. And
yeah.
in his story, we can very much see the association with the archetype of the wounded healer.
Mm-hmm.
So Chiron was also the mentor of pretty much any of the famous Greek heroes that you would care to name.
Mm-hmm.
They would all go to Chiron for a period of mentorship in preparation for their heroic quests that they had to undertake. And we can see that as a very powerful symbolic connection actually with the sun, because Apollo was actually the foster father
That's
of
right.
Chiron.
That's right, yeah.
So Chiron's actual father was Kronos, or Saturn, and his mother was named Philyra, who was a nymph. And Chiron was conceived when both Kronos and Philyra were in their horse form, because being gods and demigods and nymphs and everything, they can shapeshift, right?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
And so Kronos was actually pursuing Philyra. They conceived Chiron, and when Chiron was born, Philyra, his mother, rejected him totally because of his form. He came out half horse and half human.
Right.
And so she prayed, Philyra prayed to the gods to be made into anything other than what she was. In other words, the mother of a monster.
Yes.
Now, already, even thus far in the story, it's replete with very resonant symbolism. Even going right back to the conception. Was this a consensual mating? Or was Philyra raped? We're not really told that.
But well could have been. I mean, those gods and goddesses, there was a lot of questionable encounters, shall we say, or couplings.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, for little baby Chiron coming out as a half horse and half human, and being rejected by his mother.
Yeah. Usually, that old expression, he had a face that only a mother could love. But in this case,
yes.
Even the mother was horrified at his freakishness.
Yes, exactly. And, for one reason or another, the experience of rejection is written into the script, life script of many people. And there's something, so aside from whatever complicated feelings a mother might have arising, there's something that goes even deeper. than that, because there is a way in which physical birth can be experienced like kind of falling out of heaven,
Yeah, absolutely.
of being kicked out of paradise,
Hmm.
as a kind of archetype that's there in the background.
Hmm.
And so from the moment the cord is cut, so to speak, it's as if on one level we're on our own.
Yes.
And in one way or another, a big part, I'm going to say, of everyone's life is the endeavor to get back in connection
Right.
with the source.
Yes.
And I think that this is at the base of a lot of addictive behavior,
Absolutely. Yeah.
including the contemporary one of smartphone addiction and
Yeah.
computer addiction and so
That's a
on.
big one, huh?
Because to feel alone at first can be very frightening and even unbearable. And it takes quite a while of self-exploration and spiritual work and so forth to realize that alone can also mean or one. In other words, that no
Beautiful.
matter whether we are
I like that.
technically alone
All one.
or
Yeah.
not, we belong to the all one, which
Yeah.
actually includes everybody, including God.
Hmm.
I've said that in a bit of a clunky way, but
Oh,
hopefully
that was
my drift.
beautiful. It sounded flowing to me. So, well, it's
Okay.
like this. It's our life, our incarnation here is like a series of separations, abandonment, rejection, like being
Yes.
kicked out of the Garden of Eden,
Yes.
symbolically, and then
Yes.
the spirit, which is like fire and air. It's comes down into water and earth, so
Yes.
that the body feels raped, violated by that searing sword of the fire spirit, and the spirit feels suffocated by the body. So there's a marriage made in
Right.
hell right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And Chiron has something to do with transcending these dualities, right? Because of being half
Exactly.
horse and half human,
That's right.
half
So
animal kingdom.
both
Yeah,
realms are contained within his
exactly.
form.
Yeah.
You know?
Hmm. I know I've spent quite a bit of time with indigenous people in South
Ah,
America, where I was pioneering as a Baha'i, and here in Canada as well. And they have a very strong connection, brothership, you might say, with the animal kingdom.
yes.
Hmm. So,
I think from what I've noticed anyway, and people I've met, that the sense of a real spiritual closeness with the animal realm has been coming more and more into awareness. I can still remember a time when, if you would call yourself an animal communicator,
right,
you
the
would
eyes
be
would
looked,
roll.
yeah, the eyes would roll, or people would, cross the street when they saw you walking to the shops or something. And whether or not it was overt, there was a certain sense of dismissal or wariness or even cynicism, etc. But now it's moved
Hmm.
all the way up into respectability,
Just
and
to,
all kinds of people know about it,
yeah,
and many, many people actually do it
yes. There
and
are
are
around
able to
Toronto. There are
stand up and
several.
say this is what they do.
Yeah, people go out to these equine therapy farms where they
Yes,
have
yes.
horses, and you go. They pay a certain fee, and they're there for weekend accommodation and meals, and then
Yeah.
they're assigned a specific horse in the stable to make friends with and clean and maybe ride and talk with, and it can really, even in Mongolia, where I visited in 1987. The horse is supremely important in Mongolian culture. Everything, all their
Yes,
songs are
yes.
about horses, and they have horse races. The young boys, and the what was I going to say? Oh yes, they're starting to bring tourists in from around the world into Mongolia, which has been pretty remote up until recently.
Yes.
to go out into the hills, the countryside, and be with the horses. And there's a shaman that kind of specializes in this kind of therapy. So Chiron is at work in different ways.
Absolutely. And in this country, the UK or England in particular, there's a very famous chalk carving inset into a hillside. I mean, it's absolutely massive.
Oh,
You can
I've
only really
seen that
see the
from the
form
air. Yeah, I've seen a
from the
picture of
air
that.
or
Yeah,
from a really distant
right,
hill
of a huge horse. Yeah.
because horses and the mythology around them and their spiritual presence really featured in the ancient cultures here in these islands. And, just on the level of raising horses or horse racing or whatever, it's a big feature of the English culture. It really is.
And those cultures that first, like on the steppes of Central Asia, um, where horses were cultivated and bred, those it was a vehicle for well, not just transformation, but civilization, because they give them mobility, and in war, also wars have been a big part of developing our universal culture, and a huge part. So I'm just thinking though, we're getting if the readers are thinking, well, Chiron, half horse, half man. What's that got to do with me or life on Earth and astrology? Can you make succinctly, if possible, a connection between the study of Chiron and other centaurs as well, which have been discovered, and the science of the art and science of astrology, and how it might be helpful to know about it?
Well, in the story of Chiron, um, he was accidentally wounded by Hercules, one of his students that he was mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
And because, in fact, the wound was poisoned, or the tip of Hercules' arrows was poisoned, and that's a whole
Yes.
big story in itself.
Yes.
Um, and being a demigod, Chiron was not able to heal his own wound.
He was immortal.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, so he lived the rest of his very long life. As I recall, I think it's Apollodorus gives the figure of 984 or something like
Wow,
that
like Methuselah.
years of Chiron's life.
Yeah.
And so he lived most of his life really in literally mortal agony
Mm-hmm.
with this wound that he wasn't able to heal. But it's clear that that didn't prevent him carrying on his healing ministry,
Yes.
because there are numerous healings recorded
Yes.
that Chiron was involved in, and he became known as a wise being with a very kind and gentle temperament as well. Now, we should say that the centaurs in general feature in many, many of the stories of the ancient Greek mythology, but they're of a different parentage and a different lineage. And so the symbolism of what they represent is also different. So there's a kind of wild, inchoate mob of centaurs that are known to be rowdy and impulsive, and they will come marauding through a village and carry off brides and steal wine and generally make a nuisance of themselves. I sort of think they're like, maybe a contemporary example could be a football crowd,
Oh yeah.
jammed into a train,
Right.
shelling out beer bottles and all the rest of it.
Right.
But it's that kind of energy is chaotic and potentially violent,
Yeah.
but also incredibly full of raw life force. This is the thing. So Chiron Well, he has an Olympian father, Kronos,
Yeah.
and some of the others. He's the only one which has a direct parent who's one of the Olympians.
Hmm.
Some of the others have more indirect
I see.
links with the
Yes.
Olympians, but Chiron is the
Hmm.
main one.
So his genetic, what would you call it, legacy or heritage was more refined, and
Yes,
because he was really called like the wisest of all the centaurs and the master physician of the age, and
yeah,
the, as you said, the teacher of warriors, Achilles,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
yeah.
And you see, I feel it's symbolically very significant that it was the wound that Chiron received, it was in his lower half, his animal half.
Mm.
And where
Indeed.
the wound was located varies according to which version
Hmm.
of the story you're reading,
Uh-huh.
but it was the leg.
Yes.
Some say thigh, some say knee, some say ankle, but
Mm.
it's the leg. And it's the animal half. And I think there is now, in these times that we're living in, there is a collective recognition
Hmm.
of how much the animal half of all the beings on the planet has indeed been wounded. I
Yes.
mean, the statistics of how many species are becoming extinct
Oh,
every
so
week.
it's heartbreaking. Yeah.
I keep hearing this stuff on the radio, and it's like I
Mm.
can't take the numbers in because it's just so
It's
unthinkably
like
awful.
every day there are several species that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know what has occurred uh, in our ecosystem
Hmm.
largely as a result of the behavior of humans.
Sure.
It's like we have wounded ourselves and
That's
the
right.
animal kingdom. We
That's right.
really have, you know.
Right.
And that is part of the story of these times.
Hmm.
So, in that sense,
Mm.
I feel that just even as an image, Chiron has enormous symbolic resonance, no?
Hmm. So that concept of having pain and suffering, which is the Buddha says, first principle of Buddhism, there is suffering everywhere, all living beings. Secondly, we can discover what are the sources of that suffering, which is an amazing boon. And then the
Mm-hmm.
third principle is that then we can do something about it to start to heal it. Um,
Yeah.
so that idea of being able to have afflictions and tribulations and tests and trials, all T words, um,
Yes.
and and at the same time um, continue to have faith and to serve and to even be joyful uh,
Mm-hmm.
during the pain. And it's easy to be happy if ever you're rich and beautiful and powerful. You can do what you want. But when someone is really besought, is that the word, or besieged by tribulations, and they still have a cheerful attitude and look for ways to help others, it's really a
Mm.
sign of maturity of the soul, I think,
Mm.
of the individual. So I have a couple of questions here that you might like to answer. Would that be okay?
Mm, sure.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to read them. I've written them down here. Um, Based on the sort of the approach that you have with astrology and mythology too. I love the way that you weave in the different sciences and healing arts as well. It says, your work with Chiron and the Centaurs, because there are a few others, well, many others actually have been discovered, but Chiron's the number one. Your work with Chiron and the Centaurs has profoundly influenced modern astrology. How do you see the role of these minor planets, because they're smaller, um, evolving in our collective understanding of healing, especially in the context of current global challenges?
Mm. Yeah, a great question. Well, first of all, I'm certainly not the only person who has been working away with these centaur critters, you know.
Mhm.
There are quite a few people who've studied them deeply and whose work has featured that. You know, and I have to admit it is a minority
Yes.
of people in the astrology
Yes. Yes.
field.
Yeah.
Now, um, because, well, to bring in a bit of astronomy here, the current view about how the centaurs were formed, and in that sense, what they are astronomically, is that they originated in this belt of matter which exists surrounding the solar system.
Mm-hmm.
I always imagine it as like the Kuiper, it's called the Kuiper belt. And imagine it like a great donut
Yeah.
around the solar system,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Rather prosaic image.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, there are thousands upon thousands of objects in this Kuiper belt, which until 1992 were totally unknown. Um,
Except for
and
Pluto, right? Pluto comes from that area.
yes, he does. I was just going to say,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in even relatively recent maps, astronomical maps of what the solar system looks like.
Yeah.
You know, if you go back 50 years and you look at that,
Right.
so it goes, you know, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and then nothing.
Mm.
You
A
know,
great
like then
unknown.
there's the big unknown, the big zilch.
Yeah.
But it was discoveries that occurred in 1992 that led to the recognition of this Kuiper belt. So
Mm-hmm.
there's thousands upon thousands of objects
Mm-hmm.
in various subcategories, some of which have incredibly exotic names, the subcategories, within which some of the objects have been individually named, but by no means all.
No, no.
They get a catalogue number and all
Right,
the rest,
right.
and may or may not receive individual names. And it is like that for the centaurs. So, if I'm remembering correctly, the number of centaurs that have been discovered is somewhere around 450.
Mm-hmm.
But with the estimation that there could be another 40,000 waiting out there, it's just like in the mythology, you know, thousands upon thousands of centaurs waiting on the edge
The
of the
troops are
solar,
waiting to descend on the city, like the
waiting
Mongolian
exactly,
Genghis
waiting to
Khan.
come marauding in, you know.
It reminds
But
me
of
of
those
Genghis Khan
450,
sweeping across Asia.
yes, exactly.
The rowdy bunch. But there are very few Chirons and are few and far between. Um, so I
Yeah,
guess
so there's
the
only about maybe 20 max that have been named.
names, yeah.
And the convention is that these objects, these minor planets, in the category called the centaurs, the custom is that they're given names of mythical characters
Yes.
who were centaurs.
Who were centaurs named in Greek mythology. And I guess it's
Exactly.
because the ones that have been categorized by astronomers as centaurs, um, they're not orbiting in the Kuiper belt, but they've come in at some point
Exactly.
within our known solar system, and
Yeah.
they have elliptical orbits, unlike
Yes.
most of the planets, which are pretty round, like Venus and Mars and the Earth.
Yeah.
But they have elliptical orbits, so they actually, when they go closer to the sun, they cross over the orbits of other planets, like Saturn
Exactly
and
right.
Uranus, and some of them even cross over Neptune and come in. So that's sort
Exactly.
of what gives them this, symbolically, and who knows in how many other ways, this the paradigm of being bridges that cross over boundaries and connect to different worlds, like the outer
Yes.
solar system with the inner, the transpersonal with the personal, the
Exactly.
unconscious with the conscious mind. So if there's some
Yes.
kind of
And
a
the And
Yes,
the animal and the human,
exactly.
which we were just talking about, that's a perfect
The
example.
animal and the human, and then maybe in its turn, if we get really, if we learn how to dance with the animals, and renew that relationship that perhaps we had centuries ago, then the next connection could be with the human and the spiritual, whatever that might be,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll be able to develop those same kind of connecting prowesses.
Yes. So now, with the phenomenon of the elliptical orbit,
Hmm.
um, Pluto has a very elliptical orbit.
It does.
Now, officially,
Yeah.
Pluto has been demoted. This was
Right.
2006. Demoted from planet status. Now it's called a dwarf planet or something.
Yes.
But you see, if you just look at the fact that, okay, Pluto resides within the Kuiper belt, but does come into our solar system because Pluto crosses over the orbit of Neptune,
Yes.
who now is considered to be the furthest out of
Yes.
the so-called classical
That's right.
planets, because they knocked out Pluto,
Hmm.
you see.
Hmm.
So I have to say that long before Pluto was demoted, but certainly when some of the centaurs had been discovered, I saw the resonance of similarity between
Hmm.
the orbits
Hmm.
of Pluto
Yeah.
and Chiron and Pholus and Nessus and so
Yes.
on.
Yeah.
That they're all very elliptical and they all cross over the orbit of at least one of the
Yes.
planets in the solar system.
Right.
And I thought, that's it. Of course, Pluto is the lord of the underworld. It's
Yes.
another world. Moreover, it's a world which is very connected with the centaurs
Yes.
and what they're about and what they bring
Hmm.
into our psyche and our
Hmm.
lives. And so instead of the underworld just being a place where everybody puts all their negative projections
Hmm.
and stuffs all the things that they don't like and they don't want to know
Right.
about,
Right.
it's kind of dignified as a place
Yes.
of huge resonance and value in its own right. It's not bad because it's not of the daylight world. It is its own realm. And
Absolutely.
so the bridging
Yes.
that you were talking about, Hugh, to my mind, one very crucial piece of bridging is to do with our relationship with our own unconscious.
Hmm.
Now, remember that the psychologists and philosophers who recognized the phenomenon of the unconscious, they were still being vilified in the last century.
Hmm.
So now the whole notion of an unconscious, both individual and also collective, it's gained in
It's gained a
it's
lot of
gained
respect.
cachet.
Yeah, and people are learning that it's not necessarily something to be feared, like the thing that came out of the swamp. That was the name of a movie from the 1950s.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
swamp, which it contains zillions of pieces of data. It's
Yes,
information that is available if we know how to access it. And
exactly.
Carl Jung said that
Exactly.
psychotherapy is basically bringing information from the unconscious up into the conscious mind and liberating it and then being able to apply it. And it's interesting, I've noticed the last couple of decades that monsters, for cartoons and for children, eh, before it was always little cute little cuddly kittens and ponies and things like that, but now they have so many movies and TV shows where the monsters are actually cute and friendly with the children, and they sell dolls that are monster dolls. So monsters become cool. The Monster Mash, remember that song?
Yeah,
People.
I do.
So it's come out of the closet, so to speak. So the centaurs are like messengers, and Pluto too, sort of as a harbinger of that whole categorization. They're
Yeah,
messengers that
absolutely.
bring information from farther out or farther down up into our cognitive mind, the left brain.
Yes.
Uh,
When you mentioned there a quote from Jung,
hmm
another quote from Jung also came to my mind.
Yeah.
And this one says that the thing that people always forget about the unconscious is that it is unconscious. And what I love about that is that that's a kind of preventive measure against the part of us who likes definitions
Yes.
and procedures
Right.
and likes things to
Yes.
at least seem as if they're making sense so that
hmm
we can control them
hmm
and bring them under our own will. And so we've got everything all figured out when it's exactly not like that. So
Oh,
the unconscious is a never-ending living being, so to speak. It's part of our own
yes.
living being. And moreover, it does have different layers.
Yeah.
So one could almost say that history itself charts the movement within the collective unconscious.
Yes.
And I think that, it's not difficult to see the parallels between deep individual, personal psychological processes
Mm-hmm.
and how that gets acted out in history,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd go so far as to say that whatever has not been attended to or recognized or healed within the soul kind of spills out into the collective
Mm-hmm.
and then collects up
Yes.
and leads to situations like
Yes.
what we've got on the planet
Exactly.
today, you know?
The context of current global challenges. Yeah. So the
Yes.
Chiron.
And
Yeah. Go ahead.
just going to say, and by the way, I'm not the only person who thinks in that way. And if you want a deep dive into that kind of material,
Mm-hmm.
check out the work of Lloyd deMause,
Hmm.
Mause.
Mause. Hmm.
It's deMause in one, so it's
Okay.
Demause.
Okay. I'm just writing that down. Yeah.
And his thing is known as psychohistory.
Ah.
And that's the website,
Mm-hmm.
psychohistory.com.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually, he actually died only a few years ago,
Hmm.
but his website was taken over by the Psychohistory organization. And there's lots of incredible articles on there.
Mm-hmm.
So he's looking at history and cultural phenomena
Mm-hmm.
through the filter of depth psychological processes. And
Beautiful.
I personally find it mind-blowing.
Uh-huh.
I think he's on the money. I really do.
Right, great. I will definitely check that out. I checked. I remember I attended one of your seminars online, and you had also recommended talking about transgenerational trauma and
Yes.
collective trauma, but the trauma that filters down from the ancestors. That
Yes.
Daniel Food was
Daniel
it?
Four.
Four, that was
Yes.
it. Yeah. So I got the book online, and I read it. Fascinating how we can
Yeah.
identify a healthy uh, ancestor that we can work with, collaborate with as partners, and then
Yeah.
they help to bring the other ancestors, great uncles and aunts, and who knows what, into the fold,
Exactly.
and so there can be kind of a
A,
purifying
co-
or
a collective healing.
exactly of the whole tribe,
Mm.
rectification.
Mm.
Yeah, beautiful. So yeah, you have some good tips. So our time, unfortunately, is almost gone. So I'm going to ask the other question just to.
Do.
Yeah. Okay. Let
Hmm.
me see now. There we go. You've spoken about the importance of inner contemplation and meditation practices in grounding astrology in lived experiences. How do you encourage individuals to engage with their birth charts, their astral birth charts, as tools
Hmm.
for personal and collective transformation rather than just prediction. As
Yeah.
mm.
This topic is dear to my heart.
Uh-huh.
And that's partly because of the way I learned astrology.
Mm.
Because for the longest time, I never went to astrology classes. There weren't any where I was living.
You're from
So
South
I didn't have
Africa,
a
right?
teacher. I wasn't with an astrology school.
Mm-hmm.
And Lord knows how I did it, but I worked so hard on it. I got myself all the way up to being able to work professionally without ever having done anything normal, you know.
Yeah.
I put that down to my Mercury retrograde in the eighth house.
Uh-huh.
So I do everything backwards, you know.
Right. Right. Well, there's a lot of depth there too. Your deep research.
I think so. I was fascinated by the link between, you know, maybe what I had read in a book or heard about, or it was very limited kind of
Mm-hmm.
study input just because of my life situation.
Mm-hmm.
But once I started to learn um, the link between that and what I was actually experiencing or seeing my friends go through, this was before I was working professionally, you know.
Yes.
That's where the light really turned on for me. I thought, you know, wow, this is like, it is a living example of the old adage of as above, so below.
Yes.
You couldn't make the stuff up
Mm-hmm.
because of the kind of things you notice and observe
Yes.
as the planets unfold. So really all you need is an ephemeris and a healthy dose of curiosity,
Yes.
and you're off. Okay, so what I'm about to say will be old news for those of you who've studied astrology, but this can apply to anybody. You know, the first and most basic thing that you can do, and here I mean experience, is the cycle of the moon,
Mm.
going from new moon to full moon and then back to new moon again. And first of all, just get a feeling of how that works for you. Attune yourself to the cycle
Uh-huh.
of the waxing and then the waning, and get curious. Explore your own experience of the period of time around a new moon and around the full moon in particular. Could start off with that. And then just, you know, ask yourself, like, what's different? How do I feel? What do I experience? What do I notice?
Mm-hmm.
Also, what happens? I mean, these days, you know, a look at the headlines. There's like so much happening everywhere on all levels. Oh boy,
hot and heavy.
hot and heavy. So you'll certainly find something that will tally.
For sure.
But if you start with that, you might really get a sense of this kind of sacred flow, the waxing and the waning.
Yes. Yeah. That's
Because you see, every astrological cycle waxes and wanes, some of them over hundreds of years,
yes.
some even longer. But the one that we have in our calendar right there, you know, on our phone or in our computer,
Every month. That's true.
every month we go
Yeah.
through that thing, you see. So then what you might want to do is familiarize yourself with the symbols, the glyphs,
Yes.
for all of the signs, all
Right.
12 of the signs,
Mm-hmm.
and all the planets. And I'd recommend start with the classical planets plus Pluto. And, you know, when you feel a bit more comfortable with all that, you can maybe add in the centaurs. But I would caution you against kind of filling up your mind space with asteroids and TNOs and all kinds of objects which people are fascinated by at the moment. So start with the basics.
Keep it simple as much as possible.
Yes, because one can go into endless
Oh,
complexities with astrology, but
yes.
if you keep in mind the goal and the intention to link your consciousness with the above and the below, with the heavens and the earth,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really need all that stuff in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. And
Right.
if you're a curious person and you want to learn more, that's fine,
Mm-hmm.
but keep it
Mm-hmm.
simple
Mm.
at first. And don't underestimate the power and delight of just contemplating the raw symbols like Aries. I'm making the Aries symbol with my fingers.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a nose and eyebrows, for example.
Yes.
And um, give yourself literally some time to just sit and contemplate the
Mm-hmm.
symbol
Mm-hmm.
of whatever it is, be it a planet or a sign, and see how the symbol impacts you. Build a relationship with that symbol. Let it speak to you. So that's the thing. I always feel it's a wonderful thing to approach astrology from the point of view of let it teach you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you have to wear yourself out figuring
Yeah.
it all out. Okay, there is a certain amount of figuring out that goes with the
Sure.
territory. The basic process is your relationship with it
Mm-hmm.
and what it speaks to you, you see. And, just doing that, just with the moon cycle and the symbols, can take you really far, I promise, because
Yeah.
that's the way I learned.
Well,
Um,
this, I think, this coming Monday in 3 days, we're going to have a new moon, the new moon in Gemini, and that's when the
yeah,
sun and the moon are right together at the same spot in the zodiac. So I'm going
exactly.
to wait for 3 days because I have some other things to post as well. I'm going to post this interview or dialogue on Monday. So when people are downloading it and watching it, it will be a new moon. So if anybody out there in subscriber land would like to just close your eyes, maybe go inside, just ask yourself, how am I feeling today? How's my
Mm-hmm.
physical energy? What kind of emotions am I having? What kind of experiences are happening? What are my thoughts? And then 2 weeks later, it'll be the full moon when the moon and the sun are 180 degrees apart. And that's another kind of experience, more like a fullness or illumination.
Mm.
Right. That's great. So the heaven and the earth, connecting the heaven and the earth, that's like the vertical
Mm-hmm.
part of the cross, you might say, and then the pulsing of the sequence of the new moon, the half moon, the
Yeah,
full moon, and
yeah.
just to be able to be mindful of those natural cycles that are
Yes,
all within us, around us, in the heavens and the sky. And so it's like the whole universe is sending us information, from the unconscious,
yes.
and the centaurs coming in from the Kuiper Belt, and all we have to do is open our eyes. I think Jesus said that in the Bible. Those who have sight, let them use it, or something like that. Those who have ears to hear, let them hear. Beautiful.
Wonderful. And on the subject of the moon cycle, I would like to put in a plug
Okay, great.
for the new moon.
Yes.
So around the new moon, a few days before and a couple of days after, the moon isn't visible in the night sky at all.
Mm,
It disappears.
that's right. Yeah.
And that period is often called the dark of the moon,
Mm-hmm.
which is very evocative in itself.
Mm,
And from what I've observed, I think that's the part of the moon cycle that in the kind of world culture that we live in, that's the one that's most likely to get overridden
mm,
because that's the extreme part of the waning moon, you see. And if we were living in a culture which really did honor the moon cycle, which we're not,
mm,
but if we were, then in tandem with the dark of the moon, we might be encouraged to rest, to go on a retreat,
mm,
whether formally or just in one's own home, maybe even to fast
Mm.
if you enjoy that or are
Mm.
able to, and to read only things like the sacred scriptures or
Mhm. Mhm.
poetry,
Mhm.
and give yourself a break from the media and be very wise about what you allow into your field of sight and
Mhm.
hearing and so forth.
Mhm.
So protect
Mhm.
your own inner space, because
Yes.
really that lead up period, particularly
Yes.
to the new moon, dark of the moon, that's when, if we give it the space and time, the soul stirs very deeply
Right.
in a kind of quiet and silent way.
Uh-huh.
So, again, in this culture, when we feel our energy dropping, the first instinct is to have another shot of caffeine,
Yeah.
another cup of coffee, jog round the block to get your energy moving and so forth, which in terms of the cycle, that's to completely go against it, but to find wise ways of
Mhm.
letting ourselves wane
Yes.
and take a rest, take a
Mhm.
break,
Mhm.
and nurture that space so that you can
Mhm.
richly turn
Right.
inward. I
Yes.
mean, what a gift,
Beautifully
and a
said.
really
Yeah.
fun thing. And I invite any of you who are curious to do this.
Thank you so much. That it's reminded me that the new moon is. They say that that's the best time to initiate a new
Yes,
project, or the
absolutely.
farmers used
Yes,
to
because
plant
it
their
is a
fields.
new beginning.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so the experiment, which I invite you to try, is the following.
Okay.
Uh, if it's a reasonably convenient time, because sometimes the exact point of the new moon,
Mhm.
can occur at 3 o'clock in the morning and so
This is
forth.
true. Yeah.
But don't let that put you off, to mark out uh, a period of about an hour, which an hour surrounding the exact minute of the time of the new moon, and let yourself take quiet time.
Mm.
If you have a meditation practice, that would be a great time to do it. And simply stay tuned
Mhm.
and feel what you feel. Now, I can still remember the first time that I felt on the exact minute of when the moon turned
Mm.
into its new cycle.
Yes.
I actually felt it.
Mm.
And I was so completely thrilled. I wasn't like planning that. Oh, let me see if I can, do this. I just felt this like wave of energy. The only analogy I can give is a bit banal, but it works for me anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's as if you were lying on a lilo in a pool,
Okay.
very relaxed and, just bobbing gently
Mm.
and feeling very relaxed and so forth. And then suddenly another swimmer comes streaking by you, and then all of a
Bloop,
sudden there
bloop,
are big
bloop.
waves and a lot of energy, and your
Wow.
whole state is changed by
Yeah.
that.
Uh-huh.
That was how it felt, and I was beyond thrilled. I have to say, I don't feel that every time that there is a
No,
new
no.
moon.
It was
But
like a confirmation that
yes,
there's really
that's
something
exactly
to
how I
this, or
felt.
it's not just a bunch of numbers, but it's a physical,
Exactly right. There's
energetic relationship.
an energy shift,
Yeah.
which we can actually experience and feel.
Hmm.
So it's no longer just information on a piece of paper. It's
Hmm.
like, wow, kind of enters into your cells.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And
if we have something personal like that, whether it's spiritual or physical, either way,
yeah,
either
yeah,
end of the polarity, that often
exactly.
is the experience that people have an insight or an awakening, or all of a sudden they take a different route in their life, like
Yes,
even like astral traveling, or when they're dreaming or something like that. And it's, wow, it exists. There is something to all
yes,
that mumble
yes,
jumble, right?
exactly.
Because they can own it, right? And it's
Yeah. And the thing is, you can build on that sensitivity very
yeah,
easily,
uh-huh,
because as you just mentioned, new moon happens when the sun and moon are in the same part of the zodiac.
right.
And I briefly mentioned that all astrological cycles between two planets have the same motion,
Yes.
the waxing and the waning.
Right.
And so once you've really connected with the lunar cycle, and the moon is the closest thing to us physically on Earth, closest thing that we use in astrology, then, it's not such a big step to begin
Right.
to understand the cycles of the other
Of
pairs
the
of
other.
planets.
Exactly. And depending on the length of their orbits, that gives us the resonances, I guess, and the
Yes,
for example,
yes,
Chiron, I believe, in 2 years will celebrate its first complete orbit, 50 years since
yes,
it was discovered in 1977.
correct.
So that
Yeah.
the
And,
consciousness,
and another very topical example is that during this year and coming exact in February of 2026,
right?
there's an impending conjunction of Saturn and Neptune.
Oh, yes.
And the last time this happened was in 1989.
Right.
And back then, 1989, there were actually 3 exact contacts for the conjunction.
Right.
And I think it's about 4 days after the final one,
Wow.
the Berlin Wall came down. And just a few weeks after that, when they were still very much within range of conjunct each other, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. So we're talking epic,
Right.
world-changing
World
kind of
events,
events.
yeah.
And they also have their cycles, which of course intersect with our personal lives.
It's for that reason, I guess, some of the European medieval philosophers talked about the music of the spheres.
Yes.
It's like an orchestra or symphony, and each planet has its own note, and they're dancing in the heavens. Really, it's amazing.
Absolutely.
And they don't even collide.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
maybe once in a while.
Dane Rudhyar, who was also a musician
Yes,
himself,
it's true.
he made a big thing about exactly that metaphor, including, well, he spoke about the planets as gongs.
Yes.
And so there, the phenomenon of a transit, which simply means the relationship between what's going on now in the sky and your own horoscope.
Yes. Yeah.
I suddenly thought, oh, then it's like a transit is like when the other planet goes by and rings your gong.
Oh, which I have. I didn't get a chance to use it, so I just happened to
Oh,
have one.
yes, rings the gong. There we go.
Dane Rudhyar was a real Renaissance man, and he lived in Toronto for 1 year when he was very young. He studied.
Wow.
He was with a group, experiential or experimental theater, when he was about 20 years old.
Wonderful.
And then he went back to the States. So this is from the Tibetan culture. It's actually from Nepal, but they practice a kind of a Tibetan Buddhism there. So on that note, so to speak, thank you so much, Melanie. I'm sure we could go on for hours and hours. You're a whole library of knowledge, and I love the way your mind works, connecting like a centaur, connecting the different levels and interdisciplinary healing, mythology, philosophy, psychology, and last but not least, astrology. So thank you so much for your wisdom and your kindness and your presence here today, and it's been really delightful.
Well, thank you, really. It's been lovely to speak with you.
Yes.
And to just revisit some things.
Absolutely.
Which is always a nice thing to do, I think. Anyway.
It really is. I mean, it's to have a conversation with a friend, an interesting, deep conversation with a few laughs thrown in for spice. It's one of the best things in life, and
Agreed.
where there's some learning as well, and sharing and teaching too. Yeah. Well, maybe you'll come back again someday, and we'll have
I'd be
a
delighted to do.
part two. Oh, thank you so much. Okay. Oh, by the way, I just mentioned to the there's a book coming out supposedly soon called Sideways from Saturn about the Centaurs, and Melanie is has written the prologue, I guess, and also one of the chapters. And yours truly also has written a little chapter on being Chiron. Very
Mm.
experiential approach to communing with the wise centaur. So um, I'll put the link if you want to pre-order. I'll put that also below the video, as well as Melanie's website, which has all kinds of information about courses and books. And there's also a newsletter that comes out almost every month. So, so toodaloo, pip pip, as they say in England.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks again, Melanie.